Hi everybody, this is Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and InkNouveau.com. This is going to be the first video that I've ever done of the new ivory colored Quo Vadis Habanas. These have been much anticipated ever since the beginning of 2011 when they were announced that they were changing the paper from the old 90-gram white paper to the new 85-gram off-white paper. I know a lot of you are excited to see what these little notebooks are all about. And I'll go through all the changes and try and cover everything that I can, but my first impression is good. So let me just go ahead and ease your worries right now. The notebooks have changed, but I think there's some changes that are for the good. So anyway, I'll go ahead and show you what they're all about. Alright, so here we have the brand new, this is literally the first day that I've ever seen these notebooks for myself. The new ivory Quo Vadis Habanas. Now, they made some changes from last year. Today is April 28th, 2011. That's when I'm recording this video. This is the first day that I've ever seen these for myself. The old version of the Quo Vadis Habana is right here. It was one of my favorite journals, and it has bright white paper, 90 gram, 8mm ruling that goes all the way to the edge. It has an elastic strap, it has a ribbon marker, and it has a back pocket. Okay. Quo Vadis logo on the back, little tiny logo on the front. Really great all-around journal. The whole thing has, is it 80 pages, Rachel? Yeah. 80 pages. Sorry, 80 sheets, I should say, of paper. So that was the old Habana, and I love this thing. The paper held up really well, 90 gram Clairefontaine paper, and a lot of people, when they heard that there was a new Habana coming out and that the paper was changing, especially going from 90 gram to 85 gram, a lot of people were worried about the quality of the paper. Okay, so let me go ahead and address that first and foremost before I get into all the superficial stuff like colors and that kind of stuff. Because really, for fountain pen users, it's all about the paper and how it performs. So, I'll show you a little test that I did here between the old and the new. I took my little pen collection that I have right here. Okay, I grabbed the whole assortment of pens with different inks in them, and I wrote on the paper to see what I could do. I wrote it in the exact same fashion on both notebooks so that I could get a true and accurate comparison. Okay, so here's the new one. Ta-da! Off-white paper. Now, looking at the two, I'm going to try and zoom in so you can get a little bit of a picture here between the two. Okay? I actually didn't notice any significant difference in performance between the two papers. And that was using kind of an assortment of pens as well. I had everything from a Pilot Custom 74 with a medium nib, Namiki Falcon, which writes incredibly wet with a soft medium nib. I had a Platinum Music pen, nice, very wet, broad italic. I had a Edison Nouveau fine nib, which was pretty narrow writing there. So I tried to get an assortment of pens and inks to compare between the two papers, and I didn't notice any feathering at all. Of course, on either ones. If you've seen any of my previous reviews, you know I'm a big fan of the 90 gram version, but 85 gram version held up really well. No significant difference. And then the other thing that you may have been concerned about was any bleed through on the back. Well, I got 2 pages there. Didn't notice any significant difference at all. There's a tiniest bit, there's a little bit of what I call ghosting, which means that you can see that there is something written on the other side, but it shouldn't compete with anything that's on the other side. The only thing that it even kind of starts to just hint a little bit of bleed through was with the Sailor Gentle Petch ink, which is a new ink, and it writes really wet and kind of wants to feather and bleed through. But other than that, nothing was a problem at all. And honestly, I even got a little bit of that wanting to bleed through on the 90 gram version with that same ink and pen. So between the two, no significant difference at all that I noticed in the performance of the paper, which is great because I was a big fan of this version, and this one is nice too. Now, the other thing you'll really notice, aside from the paper color, which is obvious, is the ruling is significantly different. Significantly. Let me zoom in here again. Okay. The old version had 8mm ruling, which was really wide. I mean, it's like driving on the open highway here. The new version has 5.5 millimeter ruling. 8, 5.5. Huge, huge difference. Now, what that means is if you like to use fine nibs, you're going to love the new paper, because that finer ruling is going to allow you to really kind of get in there. You can even see the difference just between the two samples that I wrote with the pens. I mean, when I was using things like the music nib and some of the broader nibs, I was maybe struggling a little bit on the new version, because it's kind of such a tight margin. That broad nib Edison Hudson, that thing was like trying to drive a Mack truck in the city on this paper. But it did well on the 8 millimeter, but then at the same time, when you're using a fine, you feel like, you know, you're a moped driving on the highway when you're using a fine nib on that 8 millimeter ruling. But you can really get in there, especially with a nice tight writing ink like that Gentle Epinard. It wrote really well with a fine nib. So if you tend to like finer nibs, you like smaller rulings, you're going to love the new Habana. So that was the biggest concern I had, was how is this paper going to perform, old to new, and it held up really well. Now, if you want, I'll give you a live writing sample. I don't have a problem doing that. I'll grab I got a Lamy Vista with Noodler's Black, also known as Noodler's Bulletproof Black, with a fine nib. So I can go ahead and give you a writing sample if you want to see how it actually flows on the paper. So let's go ahead and do that. Excuse the out of focusness of this. Come on. There we go. Okay, so Lamy Vista. Now I wrote back and forth with the same pen, same ink, on each journal as I was doing these two comparisons. And I didn't notice any significant difference between the smoothness, the feedback, or anything between the two papers. So it looks like Clairefontaine did a good job of trying to keep the paper consistent feeling to what the old one was. So I don't have any feathering at all with Noodler's Black, and no bleed through on the back. So held up really well. So anybody who's scared about these new Habanas and how they're going to perform, let your fears be put to rest. Okay? So now let's get into colors and specifics and stuff like that. Now the old one, the lined version, was in a different color pattern than the blank version, because the line came out first. Originally, there's a whole history to these Habanas, and a lot has changed, but really what it boils down to is in the last 6 months, you had a lined version of the Habana that was black, blue, red, and taupe, which is like a brown color. And then in the blank version, you had black, you had anise green, you had red, and you had raspberry, which is pink. And what they decided to do was go with the colors that were available in the blank version and make that standard across lined and blank. So now there is no more blue, there is no more taupe, and there's no more of the old red. And I'll get into that in just a second. So anyway, now we're on to the new ones. You have two sizes. You have the 6x9 and you have the 4x6, or somewhere close abouts. Their dimensions are not entirely exact. I'm not trying to get too exact on the dimensions right now. I just want to cover some of the differences. But anyway, so you've got the two different versions. The colors are the same between the large and the small. Okay, black, green, red, and raspberry. And both sizes are available in both lined and blank. Now, the old version had a different size ruling between the large size and the small size, but this one is the same. You've got 5.5 millimeter ruling on the large lined and on the small lined. Okay, so that's something that kind of makes things a little simpler. Another great thing about these is that they've made them consistent across the world. What was really confusing about the Habanas before was that in everywhere but the US, you had an 80-gram paper off-white version that was not very fountain pen friendly. And there's reviews of them all over the place, and people were getting confused because they started making white 90-gram versions for the US, And it was really confusing to international people, especially on forums like Fountain Pen Network and other places like that, where people would post reviews and everybody would get confused as to which version was being used. So what Clairefontaine and Quo Vadis decided to do was to make everything standard across the world. So they ditched the white paper, they've ditched the 80-gram versions. Everybody is getting 85-gram off-white, just like what you see here. Okay, so the covered the ruling, covered all that stuff. The one really cool thing about the new lines, these are different lines than I've ever seen before. They are gray lines, and they're very subtle. I'll see if I can zoom in. I don't know how much detail I'm going to be able to get on these. I'm going to post some pictures on my blog that'll be a little better. Yeah, I can't really get too close. But anyway, instead of one continuous line, the line is actually made up of a series of tiny dots. So what that does is it just really kind of softens the look of the line. So that's something that's kind of neat. And I'll actually show you the difference between the old lines and the new lines. You can see, even though you can't see up close on the video, the difference between the two, you can see how stark the line is on the old version and how soft that line is on the new version. So that's something that's kind of neat. I kind of like that because when you have a stark line, it kind of competes with your writing, and that's maybe not so good. So the other thing I wanted to compare was the color of the paper. So a lot of you don't have a standard for what the color of the paper is, but you may have been familiar with the Rhodia web notebook. Okay, these guys have been out for a couple of years, and they've had off-white paper from the get-go. So the web notebook paper, to my eyes, looks to be very close to the Habana paper. The Habana paper may be just a little bit softer, a little bit more cream to it, a little less yellow, but it's not entirely noticeable. It's not like I look at the two and I'm like, whoa, that's two completely different papers. It may just be a little bit less yellow to it than the Webby does. And you can also see the difference here between those stark lines and that really soft kind of dotted line there. Now the web notebooks have 7mm ruling in the large version and have 6mm in the small version. You got 5.5 consistently throughout all the Habanas here. So that's something to take into consideration. Now there's not as much difference as there used to be between the Webbies and the Habanas. You got a little bit higher page count. You got 96 pages in the web notebook. But then again, it's a little bit smaller too. So you're getting a little bit more paper for your money. Actually, if you do the math between the 80 sheets of the larger size Habana and the smaller web notebook with more pages, it comes out to be almost exactly the same. Another thing to point out, that the lines on the new Habanas don't go all the way to the edge. But and there's also very little margin at the top or the bottom. The lines, there's a lot of lines. I think it's like 40 or 42 or something like that. The last thing I wanted to do was compare the Moleskine, because I know a lot of you are Moleskine people and you wanted a comparison. I'm not going to get into comparing paper quality, because if you've ever seen my videos, you know I'm not a big fan of Moleskines for fountain pens. Ballpoints and pencils are fine, but for fountain pens, I just haven't found it holds up as well. Big difference here between the Moleskine and the Habana size. The Habana seems like a monster compared to the Moleskine, which I like. The paper color between the two is pretty darn close to the same. The Moleskine is maybe just a little bit more white to it. A little bit lighter than the Habana, but it's pretty close. So the Habana paper is really nice, kind of soft cream color. Not a lot of yellow to it. Not a lot of, crazy stuff going on. It's just pretty good, clean cream paper. Still got the back pocket in the back. That has not changed in both the large and the small versions. Still got the elastic strap. Still got the logo on the back and on the front. This is on all the sizes and versions. And then it's got a ribbon marker. The ribbon marker on all of them is black. That's large and small, all colors. It's a black ribbon. And there's the length of the ribbon outside of the notebook. Now I kind of like that. There's some that I've used that are, the ribbon is so long it really just kind of dangles out there and you're like, what the heck is going on? This is a pretty good length ribbon. It's enough for you to really grab onto. It's not so much that you got to like get your fingers up in here to try to pull it out, and it's not too long so that you're left, look like a kite tail or anything like that. But anyway, so that's it. As far as the strap tightness goes, I mean, that stays pretty tight on there. It's pretty good. I'll compare that to the web notebook. Now granted, this is a little older. I got a little bit of a dangle there. And then my Moleskine is like granny panties there. So big. But anyway, so I think I've pretty much addressed anything. If you have any questions, you can always ask. But that is my kind of first and my initial assessment, which I give a thumbs up to the new Habanas. There have been some changes. I know some people are going to freak out, but that's okay. My initial assessment is that all is not lost. It has changed. It is a different paper than it used to be, but I think that the change is something that everybody's going to be able to embrace in a positive way. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my covering the changes of the new Ivory Habanas. If you have any questions, you can email me, brian@gouletpens.com. Hopefully you'll appreciate the changes. If not, that's okay too. Still let me know about it either way. Thanks a lot, and right on.